Hello, I'm Sarah Pavey, and in this presentation, I'm going to be explaining how to make citations and bibliographies using the Harvard system of referencing. This is sometimes called the author-date system. Let's begin. Many people think that referencing is about proving to somebody that you've not been cheating in your work. But actually, referencing is more than that. Correct referencing allows the reader to go back and see where you got your information from. By reading your sources, they can understand how you reached your conclusion in your work. It's a good idea to collect the information you need as you use each resource. So let's start by making a book reference. What kind of information do you need and where would you find it? Well, we could look on the front of the book for a title and the author. We could look at the back to see publisher information. And inside the book, we might find further information about the year it was published, the place of publication, and even what edition of the book you're dealing with. All of this is information that we will need for our reference. So here's a game. Let's see if we can sort out the order of the different components for a reference in author-date style. The name author-date gives you a clue. But when we start with the name, we're going to start with the surname or the family name first. That's because this is more unique than the initials or the first name that somebody has. So we follow that surname or family name with the initials in capitals. And then author-date system, the next part of the reference is the year that the book was published. We can then write the title of the book. Note this is in italics. And then finally, the place of publication and the publisher. Now, it's important to have the place of publication because books are now written all over the world, and a publisher may have very many different branches. So, for example, the same title of the book published in America might be very different to the book that's published in the UK. And that's why we have place of publication and publisher in our reference. So it might look like this. And then there's one very important bit, and that is to remember the punctuation. This is standard across a referencing style. And this is important because in different countries, punctuation may mean different things. So this is standardized too. And you have to remember that as you're going through your referencing. What happens when there are two authors of the book? Well, this is quite straightforward. We can just write the word "and" between the two author names. So here you can see that we've got Kirk, T, and Hodgson, N. And don't forget, remember that punctuation. What if there's a whole bunch of authors? What can we do then? It would be a very long reference if we had to write them all out. We don't have to do that. We can use a shortcut. Let's imagine we've got the first author, and this first author, he's got a French friend who's called Al. When we've got more than 3 authors, we can use this shortcut called et al. So we take the first author, et al, and the reference looks like this. So Marcus was the first author, et al is French friend. And remember the punctuation. What happens if we can't find the author? Well, textbooks and reference books, they might not have an obvious author there. So what we can do is we can start the reference with the title of the book instead. And so a reference for an encyclopedia, for example, would look like this. Notice there's no main author, it's just a title. And notice that the title is not in italics. Okay, Remember that punctuation too. So what if the book is a book with lots of chapters written by different people, and then there's an editor? It's very important that you mention the editor, or they'll get a bit cross. So if we're writing a reference for this type of book, and we want one particular chapter, we would write the chapter and note that the title of the chapter is not in italics, but then the edited version of the full book was edited by Day. You can see there's Ed written afterwards in brackets. Then that title of the whole book is in italics. And then you follow the same protocol as you would for an ordinary book, but you must remember to put the page numbers of your chapter in that reference as well. And what am I going to say? Remember the punctuation. So maybe we're not using a book. Maybe we're using a journal. What kind of information do we need for this? And where are we going to find it? Well, we might look, for example, throughout the entire journal, because the publishers of a journal want to maximize the space they've got for the articles and for adverts, which of course will pay for the publication of the journal. So we need to do a bit of detective work here. We could look on the front cover and see if the information we need is there. We could look inside the journal, and it's usually towards the front or the back that we might find the information. Or we can just look on the back cover and it might be there. So look around your journals. Then we're going to do that same exercise of learning how to put the reference in order. And remember, Harvard is an author date system. That's the clue. So the author's surname or family name comes first, then the initials. Then we're going to put the date of the article, the year of the article. Then we write the article title, and note that this is not in italics like a book. Note, for a journal, it's the journal title that goes into italics. Then we write the volume number. Typically, journals will have one volume per year. And so in brackets, we might put the issue number, because there may be 3 or 4 issues during the year. And with the issue number, it's quite acceptable to put the month of the issue as well. And finally, we will put the page numbers relating to the article we're referencing. So the reference might look like this. What am I going to say? Very important for a journal. Remember the punctuation. So it may be that we're actually looking for information in a newspaper rather than a journal. Where are they going to put the information we need in this type of publication? Well, again, they're going to be hiding it because they want to maximize space for the articles and the advertisements. So let's be a detective again and look around. It might be on the front or the back pages of the newspaper, or it could be on the inside. Usually it's near the front or the back. It's very rarely right in the centre of the newspaper, so you shouldn't have to look too far. What information do we need? Remember, Harvard is an author date system, so we need the surname or family name of the journalist who wrote the article and their initials. Then we're going to put the date, the year of the article. We're going to put the title of the article and the newspaper title in inverted commas. And finally, the pages on which you can find it. So the reference might look like this. And you can see that when it comes to the date, we're actually looking at the month and the day as well, not just the year. And that would follow the publication of the newspaper title. Don't forget that punctuation. Now, it's probably unlikely that you would be using a physical DVD now. Many of our films are streamed on the internet. it is possible that maybe you would be using one. So what kind of information do we need for this, and where might we find it? Well, it could be on the back case of the DVD. It could be on the DVD itself, and the information could be on the insert that's inside the cover of the casing of the DVD. So we need to look at all these places to find the information we need. So what do we need to write a reference for a DVD? Well, you can see here that despite the fact that Harvard is an author date system, there is no author on this list. And that's because we start with the film title. There is no author because it's a film, and you'll notice that the film title is in italics. Then we're going to have the year that it was actually distributed to the cinema or to the public, followed by the name of the director of the film and the most important people, not the actors. Then we put down the place that it was distributed from, the United States, the UK, Australia, or wherever, and followed by the name of the distribution company. So the reference would look like this, for example. And what am I going to say? Don't forget the punctuation. What if it's not a DVD, but it's a TV or radio program that I've been listening to? Well, here we could look and listen to what is being said in the program and just write that down. Or we could consult an online or physical TV magazine of listings that we could get the information from. These days, quite a lot would be on the internet, and we can probably go to a catch-up service such as iPlayer and note down the details from there. In fact, we might well be listening to it in that format anyway. So how do we put the reference together? Well, first of all, we're going to put the program title. So this is rather like a DVD. We put the program title in first, then we put the year that it was actually distributed, the name of the channel, and then the day and the month that it actually went out. And the reference would look like this. And don't forget punctuation. What about a film? So I went to the cinema and actually watched one, or maybe I watched it on a streaming service. Well, here we would need to still look for the information. So we could stay in the cinema after everybody's got up and gone home and just watch the credits and write down the information from that. Or we could go to the internet and go to a film site, such as the film's database, and write down the details from there. However, if you're on a streaming service, you might again have the credits in the information about the film on that service as well. How do we put it together? Well, again, think in terms of that DVD and that radio program. We're going to start with the film title in italics, followed by the year that it was distributed. Then we have the director. We have the place that it was distributed from. Was it the States, the UK, Australia, New Zealand? Followed by the distribution company. And the reference will look like this. And don't forget, punctuation time. Now, a lot of the information that we may be getting would be from a website. Not just a website that's been made by a company, but these days there are a lot of social media sites as well. You may be getting it from a blog or a Facebook page or a WhatsApp group or some other kinds of social media. There are lots of places that we can get it from, but that information is not ours, so we need to reference it. If we can't find it, then really it might be better to use a different source for your information. But let's have a look. One of the things about a website is that quite often the information is not very obvious. So a good motto is to go to the home page. And if we go home, we might get some more clues. We can look around that homepage at the top and bottom of the page and see if the information about who's written that page is there for us to capture. If it's not, we could look at other pages on the website. And if you right click, you can go down to something called properties on that list, and you might be able to find further information, at least about the date that it was last updated. So this is where we can find the information. How do we put it together? Well, depending on what you've got, you need to be as descriptive as you possibly can. Harvard is an author date system. So we're going to start with that surname or family name again, followed by the initials. Sometimes a website is created by a company. And if that's the case, you can actually just use the company name as the website author. Sometimes if you're on social media blogs, they might have a pseudonym or just a nickname on there as the author. You can use that, but it's probably a better idea to see if somewhere in the website information it mentions their real name as well. That gives it more credibility as an information source. Then we're going to have the date that the website was created. We're going to have, or last updated, I should say. Then the web page title in italics. And then we need to say where we took the information from. So we put available at and the URL. Now, this is important because with the URL, don't just use your Google searching URL. You need to go up to the top bar once you're on that website page, which has got the information on it, and copy that from the top bar, because it has to lead somebody reading your work to the exact place that you took the information from. And the final bit that's important for a website is that we have to say the date that we looked at that website. Because if you have a news website, then the information might change every few minutes. Whereas, other websites, they update from time to time, and the information that you've collected might just disappear. And that might lead a reader to think, well, maybe they've just made this up. But if you put the access date, so that allows them to go back through the history and find out exactly when you took your information. So what does it look like? Here's an example. And don't forget, punctuation. So how does this all come together? How do we actually write our work up and show where we took our information from? Well, when we put things in the text, they're called citations. And they might be a quote, but it might be something we've paraphrased as well. This is when we take somebody's work and we change it into our own words. But it's still not our information, so we still need to reference it. So here we can see an example of Harvard referencing author date within the text. You can see that every time we mention somebody else's work, we try and put their name and then the date of publication and the page numbers that we're referring to within the text. Then once we've done that, we're going to pull the whole lot together and put it into what's called bibliography. This is where we list all the references in full. So in the Harvard author date system, you don't have to have footnotes. You don't have footnotes. You just put the author's name and the date in your text. And that leads you to the bibliography. And you can see here is a list of all the sources we've used. It doesn't matter what kind of a source they are. You don't split it up into websites and books. You just do one alphabetical list at the end with everybody listed in there. And you can see all the authors are in alphabetical order. And also you can see, if you look at Hick, that they are in date order with the earliest one first. Okay, a few other things. There are some devices out there that can help you with referencing. One of the best ones is to go to Word. If you've written your work in Word, you can go to the referencing tab, and there you can see there are a whole host of things that can help you manage your citations and bibliography. In the middle there, you can see that you can set the style to Harvard, and underneath it, it allows you to make a bibliography. When you press the Insert citation, it allows you to put in all the information you found about a source, and it will compile the Harvard reference for you. If you go to Manage Sources, that's when you can decide which quotations need to go, or which if you go to Manage Sources, then you can see where the names and the dates in brackets need to go within your text. Underneath, we have a series of apps that you could download onto your smart device that are specifically helping with Harvard referencing. Traditionally, Harvard referencing was not free, and so you may find sometimes there's a small charge for the service. But the ones that are free at the moment are Referencer, Easy Harvard Referencing, Scribber, and MyBib. So it might be worthwhile looking at those. And this is where I want to make another reference. Over this last year, there's been a huge rise in artificial intelligence tools, and ChatGPT is one of the most obvious ones. How do we reference this? Well, it's very difficult because they're still trying to work out how this could be done. The jury's still out there. So one of the best referencing tools I've found is actually on the Scribber site, and you can see the reference down here. And that at the moment is telling you an acceptable format if you have taken the information or used an AI device or tool to compile your work. And that will show you how to do it within the style of referencing you're using. So the main message is, if it's a quote, if it's a diagram that you haven't drawn or made up, if it's some music that somebody else has composed, if you've paraphrased somebody else's writing, if you've used somebody else's photograph or film to illustrate your work, then you need to do a reference. If it's not your own work, you need to remember to reference. And that, you can never do too many references. So always think, should I put a reference in here? It's better to have too much than too little. I hope you found this presentation useful and interesting. Check out my other one, which is on footnote systems. But meanwhile, I hope that your research and writing goes well and that you get a good mark for your project. And thank you very much for listening.